We need a living master. We say other masters are dead. Yes, we claim a living master. So seek your self-mastery. I'm just making up introductory hymns, so make of those what you will. So from the 23rd of the 5th month of 1435, pleasant review of your day and the ECK Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp, Lesson 1. Before this discourse started on page X, before this discourse started on page X, we have a photo of Harold Klemp, half grinning. Let's not make fun of that. He could have had a stroke or something. He's pretty old. The caption makes it unmistakable that he is whom he refers to as the Mahanta, the living Eckmaster. Don't be mistaken as to whom is being mentioned when these terms come up, until he dies and is replaced by another. Lesson 1 of the ECK Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp is called Dreams, the Bridge to Heaven. The illustration on page 8 is of a woman shielding her eyes from the sun atop a mountain. She is not too well protected from the elements, even though snow is in the background, but she tries to see onwards. Remember how all those movies, I mean, you even have people in bikinis up in the snow. Why? Well, because it's part of the scenery. People even, there's been photo shoots down in Antarctica, and they've, I haven't seen it, but supposedly they take them, expose them, and then cover them up quick as soon as the pictures are done, risking these people's lives for their thing. But anyways, that's not quite what's things. But Lesson 1 of the ECK 1 Dream Discourses by Harold Klemp is called Dreams, the Bridge to Heaven. The illustration on page 8 is of a woman. I said that, sorry. The next page has the caption to the drawing. It is about starting a journey to one's innermost self that isn't started. I thought that it is what they claimed was being started by joining, if not looking into Eckankar. Eckankar claims to center on love. Love of what? What kind of love? The claim for the ECK Dream 1 Discourses and Stranger by the River by Paul Twitchell has the same claim attributed to it here. The first quote from that book that is said to have recorded occurrences near the Jhelum River. That's how people pronounce it, so Jhelum. That runs through Srinagar of Kashmir, mentions a love that destroys all else, being compared to freedom. The second quote of this book, said to be interactions with a space alien that took on the form and culture of a Tibetan, mentions a love that starts in the heart and gets developed. This is said to sprout into freedom and truth. Love is referred to as the center and start of spiritual growth. Al-Quran, Surah 2, Ayat 165, mentions a love for God that is greater than the love of all others, being linked to realization of the truth and doing otherwise is stifling to freedom. Al-Quran 3:31 asks one to love and follow the prophet of the age if we truly love God and want forgiveness. The next verse calls for obedience to God and the messenger prophet to earn divine love too. Eckankar here calls people to follow a program as well, But in order to gain an understanding of dreams, which is really an understanding of self, Al-Quran 13:11, at other passages refers to a change that comes from the inside being what happens, and other passages refer to a change that comes Al-Quran Surah 13:11, Ayat 11, and other passages refer to a change that comes from the inside being what happens before God changing the condition. Harold Klemp on page 111 agrees with this philosophy in a way, but speaks in terms of dreaming into reality rather than the way. Oh, do I mean page 11? Yeah, I probably mean Harold Klemp says on page 11, but speaks in terms of dreaming into reality rather than the way intention is mentioned by the prophet of this age, Muhammad. It may be important to question, as Al-Quran Surah 52:32 says, is it their dreams that dictate their behavior, or are they naturally wicked? At least Eckankar attempts to put things in a spiritual context. Does that, rather than religious context, from a man who went to Lutheran ministry school, make the mention of growth and Eck sound selfish and elitist to you too? Eck here is spoken of as either an angel, angels, or God as a verb. People mean different things by Holy Spirit other than Gabriel or Jibril or Vohumanu of the monotheist faiths. Book of Revelations has a plural for Holy Ghost, doesn't it? In Eckankar, dreams are thought of as direct manifestations of God, as sound and light. Usually, this is merely psychedelic phenomenon produced by the brain and a body. It doesn't take much experience to realize there is more than sights and sounds in dreams. The Ek-1 Dream Discourses by Harold Klemp are said to focus on the creative side of dreams and dream interpretation. The implication is clear that Harold Klemp admits that psychologists would not give the response that Al-Quran Surah 12:44 has when it says, they said, nonsense dreams. When it comes to the interpretation of dreams, we are not knowledgeable. And let's act on real knowledge rather than conjecture, right? Eckankar wants to provoke an interest in dreams, where individuals develop a broad interest and personalized system of interpretation of dreams. How does this compare to the teachings of interpretations of dreams that God provided for Yusuf in the two lands now called Egypt, mentioned in Al-Quran, Surah 12, Ayat 21? This is another way by which that prophet was taught by experience. Is the teaching of people like Harold Klemp about people always being the best to interpret their dreams part of their separation from orthodox, correctly believing religion, psychiatry, and psychology? Apparently, Harold Klemp has a psychologist, which has made his way up to being an 8th initiate, which is quite the initiatic ceiling for the company. The goal of Eckankar on page 12 is to surpass mere wisdom and attain God consciousness, much in the way of parinirvana found in Buddha Yoga. Al-Quran Surah 2 through Ayat 3 starts in God's name with a mystery and calls the God conscious to Al-Quran contact prayers and give alms. Eckankar spiritual exercises are typically easy ones and are prescribed at least daily for members. Whether you call it a spiritual eye or emotions, mind, and intuition, dreams and visions, involves different parts of you, and that is what translates the experience even when it involves metaphysical elements. I would wholeheartedly agree with the statement that souls have more than physical experiences, but disagree on the idea that they are always reworked in what we can handle. I am fine with gaps in my understanding, and don't believe in changing an account when it is not readily understood. You know, when you're relating what the events were. Eckankar speaks of a dream sensor as a function rather than a being. Sometimes, suppression of memory is intentional on some level. I believe God does not give us more than we can bear or withstand temptation from, but the idea that it scrambles messages when they are too strong seems refuted by modern brain science. One function of dreams is that they help us remember. Another function of dreams, from the scientific point of view, is to reorganize and work out what we were involved with during the day. Therefore, the seeming abstraction or fragmentation of dreams can very well be explained by our working out what we encountered during the day in another way we may typically do. All this, combined with the findings on living cells making records of the light and sound they encounter, explains the astral library, or spiritual records, sort of experiences people have, or at least partially. Anyone who's been troubled with a reoccurring dream and had it go away or change upon interpretation of its symbols may know that the Ek Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp, page 14, does make a valid point about being forced into making an interpretation. Are the dreams, according to Eckankar, reality? Eckankar teachings refer to Paul, the founder of Christianity, his vague statements on heaven as a hallmark of Christian ignorance of spiritual realms. Paul does seem to refer to something he and his followers has, and an obscured viewpoint of that will be made clear someday. Did Paul Twitchell, Darwin Gross, and Harold Klemp provide an actual look into divine cosmology? Dreams and visions are often either of the unknown and can be contradictory to what we have been taught in church or temple. Is the ocean of love and mercy described as the worlds of Ek, God, Sugmad, actually projections upon the psychedelic structures of consciousness? The story of Alexandra Costa, called Stepping Down from the Star, is mentioned in page 15 through 18. Yeah, 111 would have been 11, right? She became loyal to the Americans in 1970. She was a well-educated upper-class woman in Russia. She and her husband were ordered to try to get Russian documents published. She was amazing. She was amazed to find out how different it was in the USA than what her government told her. The stories had a grain of truth, but they were not the general conditions. There were so many conveniences. A trip home to the Soviet Union left them feeling like they had little in common with their countrymen. They went back to the States and found sympathy in other Russian immigrants. Eckankar involvement is said to be a similar culture shock of no return to many. The government of the USA helped her family adjust after they formally defected. Alexandra Costa still ran short of provisions one period and began to doubt her abandonment of the family. She was soon provided for, and prevention of a repeat of that sort of situation was established. One of the things that we definitely see, we see implications of white nationalism actually in Eckankar, despite all the colored members. But I'm not trying to be PC, but you know what I mean. They're not fully white, or they're not white at all. Some of them. could see the implication, oh, maybe America's the chosen land, but they don't quite say it that way. It's more, maybe it's more of an accomplishment for a Negro to do this, but they don't quite be that direct, But he's really pleased about the African and even the American black followers. Harold Klemp is. I'm not promoting white nationalism or anything like that here. I'm just saying this is an interpretation that people often get about Eckankar. There's more serious issues for most people than that, but sometimes what we adapt is not needed for survival or even coping. The old system of actions loses its strength as a new system is adapted. This sometimes has to be done slowly in order to not leave people lacking where they left behind. The new system should ultimately replace every truth or value with equal or better eventually. If it has the whole truth, I have found this true for Islam throughout the ages. Al-Quran, Surah 2, 106, does not speak of Quran as being made obsolete, but of locally relevant revelations being forgot or otherwise replaced by the directions for living in this international age. Inasmuch as all the verses, no two verses can be followed. Quranic abrogation is an unnecessary belief that was picked up during the Crusade period. So the idea that certain things have been annulled, you do find different subjects being talked about, but you don't find them talked about in a contradictory way. I'm reading a translation that is full of commentary that says, oh, yeah, all that stuff about getting along with people, it's abrogated by a verse. It doesn't really directly say that. Surah 9:5 doesn't say that. But anyways, it's a misleading thing that other people put on. If you can follow the whole thing, if it's talking about abrogation, it's obviously talking about, here we're talking, religion being put in a different language and different texts. So, we can wear mixed fabrics and various things. The other way of translating the passage as forgotten verses can't apply to a book compiled hundreds of times over hundreds of years with exactly the same verses to the letter in each dialect they were written. Even Al-Quran was gradually learned in its specific order by Muhammad, as is mentioned in Al-Quran Surah 25:32. I say this because there's manuscript and legendary manuscript evidence that backs these up. This occurred from 610 to 633 of the Common Era. During this time, Muhammad received other revelation and was inspired to explain the Sunnatullah of God's way of this age in terms that did not place man as superior over woman, nor one race as superior to another, nor people of one land as superior to another, except in terms of how conscious and righteous they choose to be. Some societies were changed quicker, and some individuals underwent paradigm shifts slower, and societies too, obviously. Page 18 through 19. The ECK Dream Discourses by Harold Klemp mentions, the ECK Dream 1 Discourses by Harold Klemp mentions a story as a supposed example of the dream censor obscuring a spiritual message, almost to the point of losing its truth. A woman dreamt of a lost boy looking for his parents in a many-roomed building. He was turned into a mosaic after disappearing, where another woman pointed at him. I think I meant when another woman pointing at him. The dreamer turned this paper image into a kite with pictures of a number of other children attached. She flew it near happy children by the ocean. Harold Klemp is what religious studies professors used to call a savage philosopher. Such an individual believes that when we dream of those we don't know, that we are actually directly interacting with them. A dreamer had a nephew taking Bible classes before taking a confirmation at the church, where the other woman was a curator. Allegedly, she saved him from Christianity, which is called a paper image and a dead faith with a dead master by many. Eckankar was founded by a former Radhaswami member, Paul Twitchell. That form of Sikhism teaches that with a dead master, nothing works, as you need a living master in a physical body. Can't spiritual practices work with a direct connection to God, whether or not you have a sworn leader available? The ocean was interpreted as God's presence. Diabolos is the devil, as separate from God. One may not be God or part of God, but you can't escape the presence of the omnipresent. One can only live like God is only elsewhere. That's the most you can do to separate yourself from God, is to ignore, right? Page 18 and 19 seem to contradict the earlier mention of the dream censor as not being a being by calling it a negative thing that wants to hide a connection to God. And so the spiritual exercise of the first month of the Dream 1 Discourses, one starts by saying "Hugh" for a few minutes. I don't think you have to say it all in one breath, but you can if you want. Most people, a few breaths a minute. But then one undertakes a pleasing review of one's day for up to 20 minutes as you go to sleep, working back from the start of one's waking hours. My first performance of this rite was the night following sunset on Thursday, the 6th of February, 2014. I continued with it nightly till my final performance of it between 10:38 p.m. on Wednesday the 19th and 5:07 a.m. on Thursday the 20th of March, 2014, are the 4th through 11th hour of the 19th night of the 5th month of 1435. My results are as follows. My memories became vividly visual. I could see frames of documents, pages of books, and other scenes, like they were happening afresh. I don't know how else to explain it, but they became like water. I was pouring from plain clay jugs into a river that ran through a barren landscape. When they were empty, I turned around and saw a 6-pointed turquoise star with 32 rays going from it, but not extending far from it. These streaks of light formed a somewhat even circle. On the side of the top point were 5 streaks each. On the sections on each side of the bottom point were 5 streaks each. On the sections on each side of the bottom point were 4 points. On the left side was 6 points, and on the right was 8 streaks. I was curious about this unevenness, but I remember nothing as to the answer of it. Or if there was one. There was a rainbow of light that went into me, but not in the order you'd expect. From bottom to crown, there were layers of green, pink, orange, blue, purple, yellow, and white. I was warbled into a scene one might think is comical, but it was one of seriousness and contentment. After the rushing and washing feelings that came with the lights faded. I saw myself with a horse head on a stick like a child's toy, but real and not rotten. I rode it as a child would through a modern city or cities, crossing over bridges. I took these different coins that were like unto the Goetian sigils, number 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 1, and 2. All were of equal size and were large enough to mostly fill my palm. I stopped 7 times to hand over a coin. The first was silver, the second was tin, the third was copper, the fourth was iron, the fifth and sixth were gold, the seventh was copper. I finally came to a place where I placed the horse head on a stick into the ground. In some cultures, that's how you curse other people. There was a white-winged horse there that shone like lightning. I mounted it without the saddle. It took me through the dark of the heavens till I saw 6 sapphire constellations in the way, as if there were a band around me of the Shemhamforash Sigilia, number 69 through 72, and 1 and 2. I plummeted into a place where 3 seas met, to swim with a giant creature, much like a mollusk, without a shell, and a lungfish. I felt a heady euphoria, with a warm, powerful quickening, despite utter calm and hypersensitivity. The seas were each of a different color. I felt like each had a different approach. I saw Pluto, a mostly dark waning moon, and then the sun appear in the sky above. 2 of the waters were almost the same, but the dark one was hardly like the next 2 I saw at all. Surely, if there was an official Eckankar tarot, the blue star of Eck would be its star card. The rainbow was their colors for the physical plane, astral plane, causal plane, mental plane, etheric plane, soul plane, and higher 5 or so planes. Where does the second scene lay between defeat and happiness? It may not be the 5 of swords, but it seems to be like a 9 of cups that contains elements of it. Where does the third scene lay between science and satiety? It may not be the 6 of swords, but it does seem to be like a 10 of cups that contains elements of it. Where does the fourth scene lay between futility and love? It may not be a 7 of swords, but it does seem to be a 2 of cups that has elements of it. The feelings of the fourth scene and the fact that the waters are 3 make me think of the Iranian Hyoma and the Hindu Soma. The colors of the waters make me think of the decantus of Aquarius as Venus, Mercury, and Mercury. The stellar bodies were another view of the decants of Aquarius as Pluto, Moon, and Sun. The Moon was at the current stage of the lunar cycle of the experience, which was the 19th. The combination was a reminder not to stay confined to one view of a system. Each system of interpretation has its particular laws or ways to follow that may face consequences for not following the ways of the place I'm at. The animal that ruled each of the 3 later scenes seems to be the constellations, which are the decantus of Aquarius. The second scene was a defeat, or a goal to defeat what is represented by the Goetian Sigilia for the period of Aquarius, numbers 69 through 72. 73 is connected with Halahel, and also for 1 and 2. Halahel is sort of a overlap between 72 and 1 in its placement in the year and such. I was happy. The process and am comfortable casting blame when I am without that sin and sure of guilt of the blamed. The dumping is to be grateful of the past and move on. Dreams, soul travel, astral travel, and the like are to be a science of aspiration, as are the Shemhamporish sigilli are symbols of aspiration and identity, with the processes are individuals. In the case of the third scene, it is being overjoyed at realization of the Aquarian principles. In the first scene, the blue star is as the 33rd and final stage in enlightenment. Its rainbow is as a clarity through all my being, and which I am to operate in. This means to be a reminder of God as manifesting in accord with its laws. The workbook activities. The first workbook activity asks 3 questions. I answered the first by saying I found the concept of searching out the answers in what is present of spiritual interest to me. My heart was opened by making connections to what was not in the discourses, as most who read this paper alone should be able to figure out to a degree. When I daydream of myself a year ahead of time, I see finished projects and a greater understanding. I treasure experience of consciousness and piety over other riches. I reread and edit papers often, though, as I may review this in a year as suggested. The second workbook activity is on page 22 and asks one to take a few minutes of one's pre-sleep schedule for spiritual practices. I would rather make an agreement with myself about what I intend to gain with dream work and ask God for help with this, as I do not believe any Mahanta or human master can really be party to inner or prayer agreements. Page 23 are the third workbook activity, asks one to relate to Alexandra Costa's story. I can relate to the new view of ways I really know nothing about, abandonment of the old ways and friends, and help along with the new way parts of the stepping down from the star story. I would recommend to take it easy and to not go through the change alone, to a friend looking to change for the better. Page 24 has one look at how one would act in the dream of the dreamer. I personally might accept the decision of the youth as they probably reach the age of accountability and stop trying to control other people. I might appreciate the beauty of someone practicing even a fragmented spiritual path. Page 25 has the drawing of a bridge with a 6-pointed star, Eckankar style, at the end. The fifth workbook activity there was answered as I shared what I learned and how to apply it in the former explanations. The next page invites the recorder to record the pleasant recalls. The page after it finds me by telling that I don't see any real change in my dreams since I started with this month's spiritual exercise on February 6th of 2014. I do feel more and more like I will remember something